Oh, that's not a good sign. um,
How baggy are doing? Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast, presented by Hippo Direct. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, digital marketing dude at Hippo Direct, and you can email me at max@hippodirect.com for help using your podcast as a marketing tool. This is episode number 79, and today's guest is Andrew Askins. He's the founder and CEO of Krit, and he's an absolute wizard at helping non-technical founders with their tech, including app development and more. He also curates Startup Watching, one of my all-time favorite newsletters, and if you enjoy this show, you would definitely get a kick out of what he has to say every week. He is also one of the most down-to-earth dudes you will ever hear from. So let's get gritty and critty. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Andrew Askins, the technical guy who is a godsend for the non-technical people. How are you doing today, Andrew?
I'm doing great, Max. Excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. This is neat. You know, we've connected. I've been a fan of your newsletter, Startup Watching, for a couple of years now. I think even before you acquired it, and we connected that way. And so, been in touch for a while. This has been a long time coming. But we're going to get into a lot about your business Krit today and your journey as a founder. Also some stuff about Startup Watching as well. But to start us off here, what did your life look like growing up? Like, was there any indication when you were growing up and you think back to your childhood or high school years that you would eventually be a founder and be building a more or less complicated company?
So I really don't think so. I mean, like lots of kids, I enjoyed I remember being 5 years old or something and talking to my parents about inventions. I was super into Legos and I never wanted to build the Lego set that came with the box. I always wanted to build my own thing. So like maybe you could say there were some indications here and there, but I certainly was never thinking I'm going to start a business one day. Entrepreneurship runs in my family a little bit. My uncle ran several businesses. My grandfather ran several businesses, but it wasn't really on my radar. Like my parents were kind of nerds. My mom was a journalist. My dad worked for a university. And so my plan was always just to go to college and get a job. And for the longest time, I thought I was going to be maybe a teacher of some sort. I thought maybe I'd be a history professor or a history teacher, which is about as far as you can get from tech entrepreneur. So really, it wasn't on my radar at all, at least not for like middle school and high school. I think it has kind of surprised a lot of people in my life.
Yeah, and you are the first person I've ever heard say my parents are nerds. So that's pretty amazing. Thank you.
Oh yeah, we take pride in being. We're sort of the black sheep of our family. We take pride in being the nerdy bunch. Yeah.
What is the extent of this nerd enthusiasm? I mean, what are you talking about? Are you talking about like Star Trek nerd or like I can't even think of another example, but you know.
So my dad is a nature nerd. A
Nature
couple of years
nerd.
ago, he actually got certified as a master naturalist. So he's the kind of dad who can point out. We'll be driving down the road, and he'll go, "Whoa, did you see that spotted tail kite?" I just completely made that up, but
I fell for it.
sees birds everywhere, and he'll see like he knows the Latin names of plants and he just loves being outdoors and loves wildlife and learning about ecosystems and all that. So my dad, I would say, is really sort of a nature nerd. He was also an English major in college and like studied like medieval literature. And so
Of course.
like grew up surrounded by books. There were books everywhere. And like my parents read to me from a very young age. My mom, I would say, is more of, this is going to sound kind of weird, but her nerdiness comes through in more of a creative, spiritual way. So she like nerds out over like studying different religions and like mental health stuff. And so she has a different flavor of nerdy than my dad does, but they work really well together.
Different flavor of nerds. Shout out our sponsorship with Nerds Candy. So you clearly had a fascinating childhood with your parents' passions in those areas. Did your dad ever take you to medieval times?
No, my dad hated that kind of stuff.
It's not authentic enough.
Yeah, he was like, we never even went to Disney World because my dad didn't like anything that felt like it was manufactured. So, he took me camping and took me on like an overnight kayaking trip and stuff like that.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a master naturalist to me. And another new term, but it sounds very credible. And so when you think to your mom and your dad, what would you say is the biggest lesson you took away from them as far as your upbringing that you think has helped you to this day?
That's a really good question. I think more
Oh,
than
thank you.
anything, they just really valued learning. So this, sort of hurt me in school, but I think has helped me in my career. But my dad, from like a pretty young age, like always sort of gave me the idea that grades weren't the most important thing, that learning was more important, and grades were just sort of a factor of the system. They also, I think from a very, very young age, they encouraged me to challenge everything. So I grew up like somewhat religious. I went to church every Sunday, but not in the sense that most people think of. So very early on, my parents would encourage me to ask questions about religion, to ask questions about from adults, not to take anything for granted. So there was this idea of learning and challenging the world and asking challenging questions, and not being afraid to like do tough things, that I would say I took away from them. And that has carried me through today for sure.
I think it's
They also,
good.
Oh, I was going to say there was a balance to that too. Like, my dad told me grades didn't matter, but then, they would get upset if I made a B or a C because they were like, you could have made an A in that class. Like, you're not trying hard enough.
That's the ultimate catch-22 there.
Yeah.
So, but I think asking questions, no matter what you're asking questions about, is a really good trait to have as an entrepreneur and somebody in the business world, but also as a podcast host. So I think you're a future podcast host there. But one more thing about your background, you mentioned that you had an interest in teaching, and originally you thought you might be a teacher. So what was it about teaching that you liked, and then what ultimately made you change your mind?
So I've just always liked to teach people things. Like I enjoy sharing something that I've learned. I inherited that nerdiness from my parents, and so when I know a lot about a subject, like sharing that with someone else is just really fun. And when you can see them start to get it, you can see the like gears start to turn, or that's a really rewarding experience. And I guess I felt that pretty early on, and I think I had some really great teachers too, and so that probably inspired me to a certain degree. What ultimately changed, and interestingly enough, it changed because of a couple great teachers. So like I said, in high school, I had this idea that I would go to college and I would study history or English or something like that. And I would end up, trying to be a professor, and I would just teach students. And I didn't really know what it looked like. It just seemed like a cool life, like, getting to read and study a lot. Although interestingly, I was like kind of terrible in school, like not terrible, but I didn't do my homework on time. I didn't do any assignments on time.
Yeah.
So
well, you were looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, but not the greatest track record for someone who then wants to be a teacher. Kind of weird.
Eh.
But then, so my like junior year of high school, I had this math teacher, and I was not doing great in this class. I was, probably making C's pretty consistently, something like that. And I would often, he would get mad at me because I'd be like reading a book under my desk instead of like doing my work. And so one day he pulled me out of class and just like chewed me out. He was like, look, you're way too smart for this. I know you can get these concepts, but you're just not putting in the work, and I'm sick and tired of it. Like, you need to get your act together, or, we're going to have to figure something else out. And this was a guy I really respected and looked up to. He was really, really smart. And so I wanted him to respect me and like me. And it kind of shook me. And sort of from that moment on, I started like busting my ass in school and especially in his class. And so, the next year I did really well in math and ended up going to college. And so I was like, man, I guess maybe math is something I should be thinking about more. But I didn't really think I wanted to be a math major. Like doing math all the time wasn't really for me, but I thought maybe I should try something more math oriented. And so then I took a couple of like hard math classes, and I took an intro to computer science class because I'd played around with computers a lot as a kid, mostly trying to get around like my parents' like parental filters or the filters at the school so I could play games. Yeah, so I'd played around with computers, always thought programming sounded kind of cool, so I thought maybe I'd give it a try and took this intro to computer science class. And again, just had a really great teacher. This guy, he was known as JJ the Boombox guy around campus. He had long blonde hair, thick red beard, and he would wear these like crazy blazers, like a houndstooth blazer or something like that. And he just made computer science really fun. He made programming really fun. He explained object-oriented programming to us using lolcats as an example, the old cat memes.
Oh,
and like all of our assignments were to make these little video games and stuff like that. And so he just made it super fun. I got kind of hooked on it, and I was like, oh man, programming is really interesting. And so again, it was a couple of teachers, and those teachers got me into programming. And from there, I started probably watched The Social Network or something, I don't know, but I started like reading about startups, and I started just finding these tech blogs and blogs from programmers, and slowly started finding out about this world of building your own company and got kind of excited by that. So it was a couple of teachers actually who convinced me not to be a teacher.
There you go. It all goes back to teaching. Well, we are all very thankful for JJ the Jukebox, which sounds like a new rapper. So I think we'll see him at the top of the charts soon.
Absolutely.
Let's get into Krit, which is your company that you founded in 2014. And speaking of rappers, it's probably named after the rapper Big Krit, correct?
It is not named after the rapper Big Krit.
Oh.
But, he has dominated our brand SEO since we started the company. We didn't do quite enough research when we picked that name. But on the plus side, we did get to go to a Big Krit concert a couple of years ago, and he's pretty damn good. I'm still holding out hope that we can pull off a collaboration one of these days and build, I don't know, like Big Krit the video game or something.
Yeah. I actually do like him a lot. Like, not even joking, but
he's great.
I'm sure he knows about you guys. Like, I'm sure he's, as you're saying, he's dominating SEO. I'm sure him and his team see that from the other side. Like, what's this company called Krit that's like using the same name as me? So that's funny. I didn't realize there's you guys were so aware.
I hope that he is like, has had some conversation with his, tech team or his, publicists or something. Like, who are these nerdy guys who are like using the name Krit? Like, what's their deal?
Right.
I would love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation.
Absolutely. So your hip hop career aside, you talked about your passion, your growing passion for the technical world. So it sounds like once you got into programming and computer science, you kind of got hooked. So when was it that you were kind of in that programming and coding world that you realize, there's an opportunity for me to actually start a business in this space?
Yeah, so I got a job summer after my freshman year of college with a few of my friends working for a new tech startup. And their initial idea was they were going to build an app a week. And then this was like early iOS days. The App Store had only been around for a couple of years. Everyone, like, SaaS wasn't really as big a thing yet. It was like starting to become a thing, but everyone was obsessed with, building like mobile apps. And so they were going to build an app a week and just like keep building things until something took off. And we got about 6 or 7 apps in before they realized that it was like maybe not the best strategy in the whole world. And so one, just like awesome trial by fire, like had to learn a ton on the job because we were just building and launching stuff constantly. So then we spent a little bit of time building like a bigger, longer term project that was more of a SaaS product. And then from there, they ultimately became an agency, a little bit of foreshadowing there. But during that time, I really loved working there. I loved being a part of a really small team and found that I loved like launching things and building things quickly and all of that. But I didn't love the culture that they were building, and call it ego, I don't know. But I just kept having this feeling that like, I would do things differently if I were in charge. And so one of my friends at the company, he and I started just tinkering with stuff on the side. We worked on a bunch of different things that never went anywhere. We were going to build a Craigslist competitor at one point. At another point, we were trying to look at building a tool to optimize, Google ad campaigns. We tried to build a cut list generator, which is basically like you could give it a plan for building a shed or building a deck, and it would give you the optimal way to cut the boards so that you had the least amount of waste. So we had all these ideas that we tinkered with, and almost all of them got as far as like, not even a prototype. Like, some we'd give it a name and we'd come up with a plan, like a set of features, and we'd build a couple of features or design a logo, and then we'd get distracted by something else.
You had the pre-prototype.
Yeah, we had something, not even.
Monetize that instantly.
Yeah, but the important part was we were just trying stuff and we wanted to do something on our own. And then we recruited a friend of mine who was a designer at the student newspaper with me, where I was working as a photographer. And so having a designer, then we started to get a little bit further along. And then some friends who I had met through the company I was working for decided to start an accelerator program. So they were all excited by what was happening with Y Combinator and Techstars and some of these accelerators. And they wanted to bring that to Columbia, South Carolina, of all places. So they recruited us because they were in this sort of situation where they had a lot of applicants, but they were almost all non-technical, and they wanted at least one technical team. And we were sort of the stereotypical startup founders at the time. We were, young college kids who were just hacking on stuff in our, out of our dorm room.
Of course.
So they got excited by that. The problem with young college kids who are just hacking on stuff out of their dorm rooms, they don't have any clue how to run a business, but they just wanted some people who were building stuff. And so they recruited us, and we ended up getting into this accelerator program, and they gave us $16,000 and like office space for a year, and basically told us we could work on whatever we wanted to. And so we, sat down and tried to come up with the idea that we were going to focus on. And at the time I was trying to become a designer, and I was having trouble getting critiques for my design work. And I wanted to like improve, and I wanted to create a community. I was looking at places like Dribbble that I couldn't even get into, and reading blog posts about why Dribbble sucked. Dribble's like a design community that's awesome, by the way. But I wanted to build this community where new designers could get feedback on their work. And so we decided to call it Krit for critique. And
okay, that answers a lot.
Yep. So, but we had to spell it with a K because we, just felt right. and so yeah, we got started, and that was my junior year of college. And so yeah, that was 2014. That was the year that we started the company.
So that was clearly a wonderful program for you guys. Do you have any advice for someone who is in college that's thinking about starting a business?
Yeah. So the thing that I look back on is like what really helped with that program is it lit a fire under our ass. And so we we'd been dabbling with all this stuff, but having someone give us some money, like just created accountability. And obviously that's not going to be possible for everyone, but I would say, the ultimate advice for anyone wanting to start a startup is you've just got to do it, because like reading about it, going to business school, all that stuff is valuable. It's all stuff that, I read constantly, but it's never going to like get you there. You've just got to start trying to do something, and you've got to get further along than we were getting. You've got to get further than a landing page. You've got to actually try to put a product in front of people and get them to buy it. And, if you're struggling to do that, think long and hard about like what helps hold you accountable. Like, what is it that's going to make you do something? For me, having people count on me is what ultimately makes me accountable. So even these days, if I need to do something, I don't have a boss to tell me to do it. So I'll set a meeting with my partner or a meeting with an employee or a client as a deadline and figure out what it is that helps motivate you and gets you excited, and then try to find a way to build in some accountability. If money is the thing that will motivate you, make a bet with a friend that if you don't get something off the ground in 3 months, that you're going to pay them enough money that it's going to really freaking hurt. Just got to figure out what it is that motivates you, and then use that to get something off the ground and just do it.
Yeah, I think accountability is crucial. It's key for any business. We can talk about making lots of bets after this, so we'll get to that later. but for Krit, I think what stands out about your company, Krit with the K, and what's so cool is you and a lot of your team have such a technical background and expertise, but you really have that compassion and energy to help those founders who don't have that technical background. So that's kind of where you specialize. What is the biggest way that you do that? Like what kind of goes on behind the scenes that you're able to translate this crazy technical stuff and help out those who, like me, who have no idea about this stuff?
Yeah. So going back to like what we were originally doing, we tried for about 1.5 years to be a traditional startup and build a product of our own. And we just found that we were better at the building and the design and, all of the product piece of it than we were at any of the business stuff, the selling, the marketing. And so during that time, to pay the bills, we started doing some consulting work on the side. People liked what we were building and started talking to us about building something for them. And so, we needed money. We were, paying ourselves like $500 a month at that time. And we were just like scraping by, like living with our parents, working extra jobs, trying to do whatever we could to just sort of make ends meet. And so we started doing some consulting work and found that it was paying well and that we were really enjoying doing it. And our very first like big client was someone who was non-technical. He was, a pretty savvy guy, understood business, but just didn't have the technical skills to get something off the ground. We started by helping him build a landing page. And it was really, I think it kind of goes back to that love of educating people and just talking, teaching people something. So, that's a big part of what we do is we teach people about the process of building SaaS products or building mobile apps. These days, one of the things that makes us like really stand out from a lot of other shops is we don't just build whatever we're told to build. We really get in the weeds and like work together to build out a product roadmap. And so we spend a lot of time before we start a project at all doing this paid consulting session called a road mapping session, where we meet with a client for an entire day in person and we listen to them first. We listen and try to hear about their business. Most of the time these people are experts in some field that we know nothing about. And so we recognize that and try to learn as much as we can from them. And then we expect them to listen to us when we talk about product and when we talk about how to decide what should go into the very first thing you build. And I think that's one of the things that really makes us stand out is this like sort of blended skill set of we are technical, we can build things, but we also care a lot about teaching people. We care a lot about challenging assumptions. We went through 1.5 years of doing things the absolute wrong way, and we burnt ourselves out and we wasted a lot of money and a lot of time, building something that no one wanted. And so now we try to help our clients avoid that. We try to shoot for, getting something out the door in 3 to 6 months. So we, in that initial road mapping session, we're constantly challenging them. If it's an example is like, everyone wants to build an automated payment system, right? When you think of like the ideal SaaS app that you're building, everyone wants a customer to just be able to land on the website, put in a credit card, and the software to just start billing them every month, because that's the dream. Like, not have to talk to anybody. It just works. But we almost never build payments in from day one, because even though it's something we've built a bunch of times, it still adds time and it adds complication. And what we found is that, especially if you're building something that you're selling to other businesses, a lot of times people want a little bit more handholding. So we had a customer who, we didn't build payments in from day one. They eventually built an automated payment system. And then after 2 months, they scrapped it because they found that, a more manual sales process actually resulted in more business, because people in the industry wanted to talk to a human being before buying this thing. And they wanted, to get an invoice. So it's counterintuitive, but there's a lot of things that people think they need from day one. They don't really. And so that's a big part of what we do. It's teaching people about the technical process and teaching people about what goes into building and maintaining an app. And then it's also challenging assumptions and learning from our clients as well.
Yeah, it's just learning, teaching and learning, learning and teaching. Also, you mentioned SaaS a lot. SaaS, for anybody who's not familiar with this, software as a service, which I'm sure you guys work with a ton. So no, of course, I'm just here to make me look smart. Anyway, so you mentioned that you guys spent like a year and a half of your business in doing something that just wasn't working, or you weren't approaching it the right way. How did you turn that around?
Yeah. So that first year and a half, we started off by trying to build that design community. We probably spent 3 or 6 months, working on that. We got to where we had a prototype, but thankfully the mentors at the accelerator program challenged us to get out and start talking to potential customers. And once we did, so we just started talking to anyone who's interested in design that we could find. I was in Scotland at the time. I was studying abroad. I decided to start a company and move to Scotland for 4 months at the same time. Don't necessarily recommend that. But I just started going to like meetups where there might be designers, and talking to anybody who was interested in design and just asking them about the problems they were facing and trying to learn from them. And like, other than me, no one else seemed to care that much about this, critique feedback problem. When I started talking to professional designers, the ones who actually had money, they were saying, like, I wouldn't show work in progress anyway. My clients wouldn't let me, or, my company wouldn't really let me. That's not something that's like part of my process. And so we started going, all right, well, that's not going to work. What are your problems? And people were struggling with dealing with clients. They were struggling with getting paid on time. They were struggling with all these things. So, we started, again, we kind of jumped a little too quickly into building things, and we tried to build too much right off the bat. So we tried to build this like massive project management system that would, solve all of these problems with software. And ultimately, I think part of our mistake was a lot of the problems we were trying to solve weren't software problems. They were people problems. And so they could have been better solved, again, with like education. A lot of the problems we were trying to solve, I think, Brennan Dunn is a founder who I really look up to, and he started this company, Double Your Freelancing, and it's basically just a bunch of online courses and free blog posts that teach people how to be a better freelancer. And I think he was getting at the same core set of problems that we set out to solve, but he did it with education, and we were doing it with trying to do it with software. And software is great at other things, but it's not great at teaching people how to, manage people. It's good at automating repetitive tasks. It's good at, making communication easier in some circumstances. So we pivoted from the design community to this like software tool that would manage, freelance projects. And we ultimately ended up launching a version of that got a couple thousand free users. But it just wasn't going anywhere. And, we had all these people using it for free and like no one paying us. And the real nail in the coffin was we one day realized that like we didn't even want to use it for our own side projects, like these consulting projects we were doing on the side. Like we didn't even really want to use it that much for our stuff. And we were like, oh, that's not a good sign. um, and
Yeah.
but we had put a lot of time and energy into the design, and so it looked good. It was pretty usable, and so it was sort of the first portfolio piece, and then we picked up a couple of these consulting gigs, again being technical people in a relatively non-technical area. Some friends started referring work to us, and we just started picking up some stuff here and there and realized that we were really loving that. And so one day, I remember my two partners and I, we went and took a walk, and we sat in the grass, and we just had a tough conversation and said, like, this isn't working. This other thing that we said we weren't ever going to do, which is like full-time consulting, seems really appealing. And it seems like we could make some money at that and like learn a lot through that process. And it seems like something we're really enjoying. And so we made the hard decision to shut down the product. It had only been live to the public for a few months, but we'd been working on it for like, over a year. And so we shut it down, and we emailed all of our customers and said, hey, look, we're really sorry. This is why we're doing this. And we launched a couple months later, launched a new website that talked about Krit as a consulting agency. And so then for the past 4 years, that's what we've been doing. We've been focused on being a better consulting agency. And it was really rocky in the early days, being all technical. We all tried to like just be programming all the time, and finally realized that wasn't going to work. And so started investing more time in marketing and sales. And yeah, slowly but surely we've built up a small team and I think a pretty strong reputation and a solid business.
I'm just picturing John Taffer from Bar Rescue walking in and yelling, "Shut it down!" That's probably. But you've had an incredible journey in this space, and so it's always interesting, like how long it can take for clarity to happen, like to realize what part of your business is actually has more potential and what you should focus on. And so that became clear for you guys, over the course of a year and a half or more. So that's really cool in itself. Just one more question about the sort of the technical side of things. So you guys are obviously fluent in the language of this sort of thing in the tech space. I mean, as somebody who doesn't really know too much about coding or building apps or developing anything like that, it's pretty it's a pretty intimidating space because there's just so much to know there, and that there's so many coders and developers that spend so many hours a week on it. It's pretty crazy. What's the simplest way that you can sort of dumb it down, if you will, and in that you guys translate this advanced technical expertise to somebody who doesn't have the knowledge or the background on it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think, first of all, I totally hear the intimidation. I mean, even as a programmer, it's intimidating. Like when I was first getting started learning to code and everything, it felt more like a learning cliff than a learning curve. Like you felt like you had to just pull yourself vertically up a rock face before you could even get to the point where you start learning a little bit. So I totally hear the intimidation factor. I also think it's important to know that like you really don't have to be technical to start a successful tech company. There are loads of examples of people who have started really successful companies who weren't technical. And I think in this tech world, we put so much value on those stories of like the mythical hacker, the Mark Zuckerberg type who like built everything themselves and then figured out how to run a business. But what's way more often the case is, there's a non-technical founder who is a really important part of the story, and they're doing the really, really hard stuff, which is the marketing and the sales. And in my mind, that stuff is just as hard, if not more hard, than the product. Anyone given enough time can learn to build something. So I think, one, we don't value the non-technical skills enough in this industry. And then I also think that like you don't really need to learn all the ins and outs of how everything works to be a successful founder. But you do need to learn enough to be dangerous. So you need to learn enough to, like you said, to translate, to speak the language. You need to know the difference between a front end and a back end. You need to know what a server is and kind of how it works. You don't need to know how to write server code. You don't need to know like how to configure a server from scratch. But you need to have an idea of what it is. You need to know what people are talking about when they say the cloud.
What's that? I'm just
Yeah, but I mean, it's not a bad question. Like, for so many people, the cloud is just this mysterious thing, when really it's just a computer sitting in a room somewhere that you're remotely uploading stuff to. And
see, I've never even thought of it like that before. So you're just brilliant.
yeah, I'm not brilliant. I just have spent a bunch of time studying this stuff and trying to think about how to communicate it to people. But yeah, so we've written a bunch of content on our blog around these topics. We try to take these technical topics and explain them. So we have what we call the technical primer for non-technical founders. It's one of the core pieces of content on our blog. And it's basically a glossary of terms. It just goes through a bunch of these jargony words that can seem so intimidating at first, and breaks them down in ways that are more approachable, I hope.
And so, I definitely need to check that out. That's awesome that you guys did that.
Thanks. And I think that's really what non-technical founders need to learn is, again, you don't need to learn how to program, but you need to learn how to speak to a programmer. And that just takes time. It's just like anything else. I was talking to my girlfriend the other day, and she works at a much bigger tech company than me. And so they have their own jargon. She was throwing all these terms at me, like release manager and PI planning and all this stuff. And I was like, again, whole new language. And that happens with so many fields, but you just have to put in a little time and learn these different sort of jargony words. And then it starts to feel a lot less intimidating.
So you finally decide to start a podcast. Congrats! You've never been more excited. But wait a sec. You quickly find out this is way more of a time commitment than you initially thought. You're going to need someone that has you covered behind the scenes. That's where I come in. Email me at max@hippodirect.com and let's get wild. So you mentioned blog, and on that content marketing note, I want to talk newsletter for a little bit here. So
sure.
You acquired and now run and curate and manage and et cetera, Startup Watching, which is an incredible newsletter. And I think, and I'm not sure your latest numbers and how public you are, but I know you have at least 10,000 subscribers who are very focused in the entrepreneur startup space in the business world. How'd you go about acquiring this newsletter in the first place? Because it's a unique approach, but it's definitely it's amazing that you did it, and I'm sure it's just opened so many doors for you.
Yeah. So one thing that might be interesting is the numbers are actually a little bit different than where we were when I acquired it. So when I acquired it, it was at about 12 or 13,000 subscribers. And now we're down to closer to 5,500. And that's because I've really aggressively pruned the inactive subscribers. And the reason for that is I just didn't feel I felt like subscribers was a vanity metric. I wanted to know who was actually, an active part of this little community and who was reading the stuff I was sending out every week. And I wanted to get a better sense of what my real numbers were. So I ended up removing a bunch of inactive subscribers. And that's something that it was a tough decision, but I think it was the right one, or it will be in the long run.
I'm going to name you the expert at shrinking a newsletter for good or for worse.
That's what everyone wants to be. Yeah.
That's your passion area. No, it makes sense. I mean, there's no point of subscribers is definitely a vanity metric, especially when there's so many inactives on there. So it's definitely for the better.
Yeah, the acquisition process just came about kind of naturally. I had been following the newsletter for a while. It was one that I really enjoyed reading. And one day on Twitter, I just noticed that Bram Constein, who started it, mentioned that he was thinking about selling it. And I had been wanting to get more involved in content for a while. We were running a Krit newsletter, but I wasn't the one writing it. And I wanted to have something that was maybe mine to experiment with and play with. And so I just sort of reached out to him, and I was like, hey, I think maybe I could acquire this. What do you think? What are you looking for? Is this even a possibility? And, he sort of threw a number out at me, and it was a pretty high number. I can't disclose the the actual number, but it was,
Oh, that's
it
okay.
was under $20,000. But it was a
Okay.
significant amount of money. It was more money than I'd ever spent on anything in my life.
Wow.
And but I decided to do it. And looking back from a financial perspective, I don't know if it was necessarily the best decision because I've sold some sponsorships and I've made a good chunk of that back, but I haven't made it all back.
Hmm.
But I still don't regret it at all because one, acquiring something that had an existing audience forced me to get into the habit of sending something every week. So going back to accountability, I was struggling when I had tried to write a newsletter of my own, struggling to get something out every week. And so knowing that there was an existing audience that was interested in this thing created that accountability for me to start sending it regularly. And then the biggest thing that Startup Watching has done for me that I didn't expect at all is you sort of hit on this when you asked the question, is it's opened doors. So I've met people like you, I've met people like Jason Zook, several times had people reach out to me when I included an article of theirs in Startup Watching, and I guess they just found it through like their analytics or something. But they've reached out to me and said thanks, and I've ended up connecting with some really, really interesting people who are have audiences of their own. And I don't think any of that would have happened if I hadn't bought it. So it's been a really neat experiment. Going back, maybe it would have been a smarter financial move to grow a newsletter of my own, but I still think it was worth doing for me at the time, and I've learned a lot from it.
Yeah, you've clearly gotten a lot out of it. I think that's the most anyone has ever paid to meet me. So I'm just eternally grateful for you. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'll try to stay
it's
humble,
been worth
but
every penny so far.
thank you. Yeah, well, that goes without saying. But last piece on that. So the technique you use with Startup Watching is curation, and I think it's such an appropriate and effective technique from a newsletter standpoint, because what you're doing is, for the reader, you're making it so much more easy and convenient for them to take in valuable information, as opposed to them scurrying all over the web and Twitter and LinkedIn and everything they look for and newspapers, things like that. You have it all in one place, and you do have and you do a hell of a job with it. So we've seen this ourselves with the Hippo Digest, where we curate creative marketing ideas, and a lot of our
Mhm.
clients are interested in sending out email newsletters or emails of their own. So this hits really close to home. Would you say is the top tip you have for curating for a content marketing standpoint?
Yeah, so I think curation is really interesting right now because it's there's so much crap out there that people start to feel overwhelmed, and so if you can be the person who helps them sort through the cruft and find the stuff that actually matters, then I think people find that valuable right now. I mean, even if you do a Google search, people have gotten so good at SEO that half the time you search for something on Google and the first page of results, there's a couple of good links in there, but there's a lot of crap too. And that's
Yeah.
something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I'm trying to do some new experiments this year that center around that value of curation. But I think the number one tip is, one, I think categories help. That's something new I've been experimenting with recently, and something I want to do a better job of. But having some predefined categories just helps force you to make sure you're mixing up the content that you're including, and you're not just including the same kind of stuff every time. And you should just match those categories to your audience. And then two, I would just say, don't get lazy. It's really easy some weeks to feel like you just don't want to like deal with reading a bunch of stuff, and you don't want to have to do the hard work of thinking through like what to actually include and what not to. But just don't ever include something that you wouldn't really enjoy reading yourself and that you don't think is genuinely valuable.
Yeah, I think that's super key. I mean, there's a difference of feeling like you have to get something out that week versus being genuinely excited to get something out, because if it excites you, it's likely going to excite your readers as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's switch gears a bit and get to the mind of Andrew, which, by the way, my brother's name is Andrew as well. So this is just kind of trippy. But
Good name.
yeah, great name. Fantastic. One of the best, probably second best, maybe third best. But I'm just kidding. What, when you look kind of internally, intrinsically, and think of how you stay inspired, how you stay motivated, let's talk about creativity first. What do you do to stay creative?
Hmm. Man, good question. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. One, and this is something I'm actually trying to change a little bit, but I've always just consumed a lot of information. I've always loved to read, loved to watch television. Lately, I've been getting really into YouTube and like going down on these YouTube rabbit holes and discovering these really, really incredible creators who
Uh,
are creating. I've gone on binges of like parkour videos on YouTube. There's some brilliant filmmakers who are parkour athletes on YouTube. Science YouTube is fascinating. Comedy YouTube is fascinating. There's so much creativity there. And then I follow a bunch of people and I just love to read constantly and just, blog posts and books a little less these days, although I still try to read books when I can. But so I listen to a ton of podcasts. I consume a lot, and I'm trying to change that a little bit because I want to become more of a creator and a little bit less of a consumer. But I think that consumption does fuel my creativity because it gives me ideas and it exposes me to trends and to how people are thinking. And so I think that there is value in that. You've just got to find balance to it. I would also say that like I love living in Charleston, South Carolina, because it's not your sort of stereotypical tech hub. And so like most of my friends don't work in tech. They don't really care about tech. And that can be really inspiring too. It can like, one of the best things I did for my like personal creativity and confidence this year is I spent 6 months repairing my grandfather's sailboat. And
yeah.
it was this like 40-year-old sailboat that just needed a ton of work. And I had to do fiberglass work. I had to do electrical work. I had to re-rig it. I had to just do all these things that I'd never done before. And it was just so outside of my comfort zone and so new and so scary. Like drilling that first hole in the side of the boat was terrifying. Guess what? I drilled it in the wrong place and it sucked. And then I figured out how to patch it and I drilled another hole. And so doing things outside of, the normal tech bubble, I think is also important for staying creative.
Yeah, I'm all about that. So just drill another hole. There's a new tattoo there. So what is it about these event, like whether it's working on your grandpa's boat or hanging out with your friends that are in totally different business worlds, or even just watching video? What is it about doing these things that are so far from what you do on a daily basis that you think helps you in terms of creativity that you can pull back into the business?
Well, I think just doing things that aren't related, it's almost less about creativity and more about creating the space for creativity. Like creativity isn't something you can force. It happens when there's like room to breathe. And so I often, when I'm like following other people in tech and reading all this stuff about tech and and studying other entrepreneurs and other founders, it doesn't even have to be tech. I start comparing myself and I start feeling all of this artificial pressure that isn't real. And so when I start, like just when I go hang out with some friends who, I have a friend who's a journalist. I have a friend who's a graphic designer. I have a friend who's like a, construction manager. And so when I hang out with these people, it just gives me some perspective to go, oh, they don't really give a shit about this like bootstrap founder I just found that's killing it. None of that stuff matters to them. So why does it matter so much to me? And that creates room to breathe. And then creativity shows up in that space. Whereas when you're putting pressure on yourself constantly, it's like the surest way to kill and stifle any sort of creativity.
Yeah, you need to let it breathe. I'm curious on the YouTube part. I mean, you can just feel your passion for the different creators you've stumbled upon and in the rabbit hole of YouTube that it can you can definitely get lost in there for hours. But who comes to mind? Like, who are some of your favorite creators? I mean, it could be about business or it could literally be about parkour, anything you want. So what are some names that come to mind that we should check out?
None of my favorite creators on YouTube are about business. So again, that's, getting some perspective and I think maybe that's an opportunity too. I think there might not be any great creators. I'm sure there are some clever people, but
yeah.
So a couple of my favorites, Simone Yetch is this amazing founder. She's known as the queen of shitty robots. So she builds shitty robots and films these sort of like half comedy, half engineering type videos. where she explains what she did and then like shows the hilarious problems that come of it. Storer, Storror, is this like parkour stunt team. They're these young guys who live in the UK, and they're like brilliant. They are incredible filmmakers, and they're constantly like putting themselves in dangerous situations and creating incredible art from it. David Dobrik is this fascinating guy. He's, I still can't decide if I would like him in person or not. But he's this hilarious filmmaker. All of his videos are super short, and he just films his friends doing stupid stuff. And these days they have lots of money, and so they just end up like doing crazier and crazier stunts. He also gives a bunch of his money away just like to like help out his friends.
Is he like the new Is he like of the Jackass realm, like inspired by those guys?
Kind of. He's actually had the Jackass guy on his on his like daily vlog a couple of times. But
oh really? Who Knoxville or Steve-O?
Yeah, Johnny Knoxville, I think. So yeah, he's like kind of like a new age Jackass, but like a little less about like physical pain slightly, but he does occasionally shoot his friends with paintball guns.
I mean, who doesn't?
So like it's just like the creativity, the way he edits videos is brilliant. Casey Neistat is one of the OGs. Like he is like the person who invented daily vlogging, and he's such an incredible storyteller. There's a young woman, what's her name? Elle of the Mills is like a brilliant storyteller. And she just creates these short little videos about her life, and it's just like so creative in the way she organizes the story. And it's like, she's one of the fastest growing YouTubers ever.
Oh my God. Have you ever curated like a YouTube playlist? Because you could easily do that, and I'm sure you could share it out. You could share that out in Startup Watching, and I'm sure people would love that.
Man, that would be super fun. Maybe I should do that. Just like 10 YouTube videos you need to watch to like just get inspired.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you are. I don't even need credit for it or payment or any. Well, you already paid me $20,000, so we're good. Yeah. So let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shoutout of the Week.
The Wild Business Shoutout of the Week.
I know it's extremely impressive. Wild Business Shout of the Week. This is where we talk about a recent, it could be an ad or campaign or just something in this creative marketing world that caught our attention. And there's something you saw from Grow and Convert that caught your attention. You mind walking us through that?
Yeah. So when I think marketing, like the stuff that I really nerd out on is SEO and content marketing. Content marketing to me has just always felt like the most natural form of marketing because it's less salesy. It's like, I'm going to give you some value. I'm going to teach you something valuable. And in exchange, you're going to give me a little bit of your attention and maybe buy something from me one day. And so it's always just felt much less aggressive than a lot of stuff. And so I really love content marketing, but like our biggest struggle for years has been figuring out, once we create great content, how do we actually get it in front of people? And we've tried, one of the big things that we've tried is like, we've tried the usual stuff, like tweet it out. Okay, great. If you don't have a big Twitter following, that doesn't really do a whole lot. We've tried a little
instantly goes viral.
Instantly goes viral. We've tried a little bit of influencer marketing here and there, like building relationships with people and like sending stuff to them, trying to get stuff into newsletters. It's like kind of how I discovered Startup Watching and how I ultimately ended up buying it. Email marketing, so like sending out emails. But again, all of these things, like it's tough to tap into new audiences. So Grow and Convert recently wrote this really great article called, why we're doubling down on paid promotion and SEO. And it just like in super detailed, super specific terms explains like the tactics that they use to promote their content. And so they look at this great combination of SEO, which most content marketers know is like the ultimate holy grail. Like SEO can deliver so much more traffic and such consistent traffic and like, relevant traffic where people actually want to buy from you. It's just better as a distribution channel than almost anything.
Right.
But it takes a really, really long time to build it up. And so Grow and Convert has started combining that with paid traffic, mostly social ads. And I've been really wary of social ads for a long time. But this strategy of, it's not that we're going to do paid ads forever, it's that we do paid ads in the interim. And then over time, SEO takes over and we start paying less and less. And so we ultimately get to a point where the SEO growth curve eclipses the paid ads and we don't have to keep paying. But in the meantime, we're testing the content and we're getting traffic to it right away by paying for it. And it's not, an easy strategy if you're broke. But if you have the money, if you have some business success and you want to double down and invest that into content, then this makes so much sense to me. And the way they explain it is really smart. And so it's something that we're going to start trying to do at Krit over the next few months.
Yeah, well, that's super helpful. And we'll be sure to link out to the article in the show notes. I'm totally with you that, obviously I have a lot of enthusiasm for the content marketing world, but SEO is still so crucial. Actually, a couple previous guests came to mind when you said that. One was Tom Casana, who was all the way back in episode number 9, who I'm not sure if you guys have met, but I know we have a mutual friend, in Mike Koala. And
Cool.
he's got the company Sure Oak and just SEO expert. And he really did an amazing job laying out in his episode, like the basics of SEO and just some simple things that anybody can do to improve. So I'm sure probably some of that ties to that article as well.
Cool.
And then episode 77 with Mike Alton, he is like the blogging expert. And he put it so well, like how so much of what you should be doing should be basically to appease Google and to help your stuff rank better on Google. And still to this day, like how blogging is such an effective technique there. What do you think is the most surprising thing out of this article that jumped out at you?
Well, I feel like one, just like the amount of specificity. So they like break down like rough costs. They get really, really specific about the way they promote their content, like which social ad networks work best, how they prioritize which articles to build backlinks to do SEO, like once they want to start pushing the SEO more. So the specificity is I think a big part of what jumps out. But I feel like too, paid advertising is just like, rightfully is getting some pushback right now. There's a lot of people who, there's a lot of these companies who have built, kind of shitty businesses that seem to make a lot of money, but also spend a lot of money by just funneling money into paid advertising. And there's also some ethical questions that are super valid about targeting and data privacy. So to see this company say like, oh no, we're actually doubling down on paid right now when a lot of other people are moving away from it, but we're taking a holistic approach and looking at how paid can be part of a long-term strategy and not just looking at shoving money into something and not worrying about how to eventually reduce that spend. I think is just really smart.
Yeah, it is. And there's so many ways to experiment in the paid world. Like there's so many. It's such a tricky thing because it can work really well for you if you do it right, but you can also waste so much money so quick. So it's
For sure.
It's crucial to get that right. So let's get to a segment called The Unusual. So pet peeves, quirks, and weird talents. So what's your biggest
Sounds
pet peeve?
great. Oh, my biggest pet peeve is macaroni and cheese that isn't made with elbow noodles.
I knew you were going to say that. Why is that? Why does it fire you up so much?
I just, I think if it's made with something else, then it's pasta with cheese. If it's made with elbow noodles, then that to me is macaroni and cheese. This is a raging debate between my co-founder and I. There are two places in Colombia where we grew up that both have excellent mac and cheese style dishes, but one of them is mac and cheese and one of them is penne pasta with a cheese sauce. And so we just love to argue about it. I'm also just a mac and cheese aficionado. I fucking love mac and cheese. I think it's one of the greatest foods ever invented.
It is so good. Okay, so I won't send you Velveeta in a care package. So that's good to know.
Please don't.
How about quirks? Is there something that you're a little quirky about, and maybe that like a friend or co-founder calls you out on? That's something about your personality that's unique to you, but it's who you are. you're not going to change?
Oh man, that's a good one. I'm having trouble thinking of something that comes to mind immediately. I mean, if you didn't guess from the mac and cheese thing, I'm obnoxiously opinionated, and people often call me out on that. I think one of the kind of weird things is like I love anything that makes me feel unique. I don't want to be put in a box. I don't want people to think that I'm like the same as everyone else. I want to be sort of, I want to stand out. And so that is something that I have always like tried to embrace. I mean, within reason. Yeah. Other quirks. I, this is a really weird one. I can make a really weird noise by tapping on my chest. Like my collarbone almost sounds like hollow. So I can make
Oh my God. Can you do it into the mic?
Let's see. Hold on.
That's your chest? That's your
That's just me tapping a finger against my chest.
Okay. I'm not sure how clear it came through, but I will definitely take your word for it. That's a unique one as well. I'm just picturing you doing that and like seeing how it sounds while you.
Really weird. It was a really weird look. I'm glad I'm in a room with the door shut.
Perfect. And how about weird talents? What's something that you're really, really good at that doesn't necessarily impact your business? Like it could be a memory trick or like something you're good at outdoor. Like what's something that you just have a random weird talent at?
Other than like making a strange noise by tapping on my chest.
Yeah, I think we've covered that ad nauseum.
Let's see. Weird talents.
Whatever you just did right there, whatever that sound was, I will take that as the answer because that was what was that?
Just me making a clicking sound with my mouth.
Oh my God, you're a one-man band here.
I would say too, this one does actually come in handy with business a little bit, but I've always been good at just cramming a lot of information into my head in a very short amount of time. Unfortunately, I tend to then promptly forget it, but I was excellent at cramming for tests in school, so I could start studying at midnight and just cram it all into my head by the next morning. And of course, then 2 days later would have forgotten it all, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah, there's always the cramming debate. I found when I was a student, I was the same way. I mean, some people would say that it helps to study a little bit every day, but if I did that, I would not have done nearly as well on tests. Like it just sometimes you need to stay up late and go crazy on it, and that's how it works. And then you forget it.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A here. You ready for it?
Cool. Let's do it.
All right, let's get wild. I know you used to work as a photographer. What is one tip for getting better at photography?
Ooh, great question. So the rule of thirds, if you imagine a grid broken up that breaks up a picture, and so there's basically, you split a picture vertically and horizontally into thirds. If you place things, instead of taking a picture where the subject is right in the middle of the photo, if you just shift it a little to the right so that it lines up with one of these imaginary lines, so that it's about a third of the way either to the right or left, or a third of the way to the top or bottom, that'll just instantly make your picture more interesting and more visually appealing.
That's very helpful. All right, keep in mind for next time. How about puns? So I love puns, admittedly. I know at the time of this recording in your Twitter bio, you call yourself the master of pun. So this is a little duel here. Is there a recent pun that you made that somebody just kind of rolled their eyes on, or pun that you can think of that comes to mind?
Oh God, put me on the spot. A recent pun that I made, I make them all the time, but they're so dumb, so horrible that I then try to block them out.
So you critique yourself.
Yeah. I remember saying something to my girlfriend recently though, and she was just like, "Oh my God." What was it? Man, I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry to do this to you.
No, it's a tough question. It's hard to think on the spot. Well, I'll bring up the Mike Alton interview again, and for some reason he kept using. He said it in the interview, but he's like, I don't know why, but every business example I'm trying to use today, I'm talking about chairs. It was like a business that was making chairs and chair. Like He has no affiliation to chairs whatsoever other than sitting on them, but it was a bunch of chairs examples.
Interesting.
And at the end, he said, cheers. And then I just kind of instantly said, cheers, chairs. And then we promptly ended the episode.
That's truly terrible because that's barely a pun, but I love it.
Charily a pun. There you go.
Charily a pun. Excellent.
Yeah. All right. We'll do. Yeah, it's tough to think of on the spot. What is, other than elbow mac and cheese, what is your favorite food to cook?
My favorite food to cook. So this is going to be kind of a boring answer. I've been on a taco kick lately because for Christmas I got a tortilla press, and so I've been making homemade tortillas. And so last night I made some shrimp tacos with homemade tortillas, and I fucking nailed the tortillas. Not to brag, but yeah, they came out perfectly. And just like sauteed some shrimp with some chili powder, cumin, a little bit of lime, a little bit of garlic, some sea salt, and then mixed up a little sauce with some sour cream and a sort of garlic chili paste, and then onions, cilantro. That's what I've been cooking lately. The thing I want to master though is Asian food. I just like. And that's a super broad range, I'm aware.
Yeah, you really narrowed it down there.
Yeah. So really the two things that I would love to be able to make, I'd love to be able to make a good pad thai and then a lo mein of some sort, like two noodle dishes that I'd really love to be able to master. And every time I've tried to make them in the past, they've turned out horribly. So I'm trying to step up my food game there a little bit.
Yeah, it can't be too easy. Well, you're well on your way to becoming the master of pad thai and the master of lo mein. We'll add it to your resume as well. And then last one here. What is your favorite outdoor activity?
I love to go backpacking. So I love to pack 30 pounds, put it on my back, and then hike 20 or 30 miles. Not a day, but 10 miles a day, camp, set up camp. Cook over a fire, and I just love to be outdoors where there's shitty cell service with a couple of friends, and nothing makes me happier.
There you go. Well, you're running through the U.S. like Forrest Gump, so that's pretty impressive as well. So this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing all your wisdom and your journey and your not too strong thoughts on mac and cheese. But no, this has been awesome. Thanks again for coming on. And where is the best? This is going to be a trifold here. Where's the best place for people to connect with you, to connect with Krit, and to sign up for Startup Watching?
Yeah, so the best place to connect with me, if you just at Andrew Askins, Askins on Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so that's the best place to get a hold of me. And then Krit, Krit.com. It's an easy one, 4 letters. And then Startup Watching, you can either go to startupwatching.com or go to myname.com. So Andrew Askins, Askins.com, and you can sign up there. You can find me in any of those places, honestly. And thanks so much for having me, Max. This was one of the most fun interviews I've done in a long time. So really enjoyed it.
Oh, of course. Happy to. Thank you so much. Had an amazing time as well. And I cannot speak highly enough about you and your business and the Startup Watching as well. I mean, I know I look forward to it every time you send it out. So definitely encourage people to subscribe, sign up for that as well. Last thing here, final thoughts. Stage is yours. It could be a pun I know you've been thinking of all day, or it could be a big Krit song. It could be just a quote, whatever you want. Stage is yours. Send us off here.
Oh, man. So I would just encourage anybody who is trying to get into business to just get off your ass and do it. Figure out a way to hold yourself accountable, find a coach, find a friend, and just start trying to do it. Whether your idea is to start a podcast or a newsletter, an agency or a software business, the only way to get started is just to do it. If I have to leave you with something, how about this? I'll leave you with, so my little sister and I last week got a tattoo together for the first time. And the tattoo was based off of a line from a Leonard Cohen song. So the line was this: Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Cheers.
Cheers.
The day we stop using chair puns will be the day I stand up. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing your journey and tips and lessons in this week's podcast. And thank you, Wild listeners, for tuning into another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also dig into our marketing and business growth resources at hippodirect.com/blog and hippodirect.com/newsletter. That newsletter is the Hippo Digest, and it's your place for wild marketing ideas every single week. And last but certainly not least, come say hey and join the conversation on your favorite social media platforms / sites or apps at the handles Hippo Direct and Max Branstetter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!